best and try to be short. Most of the ladies and the gentlemen here spoke of communism, which actually is in America, we still call it socialism. Socialism, in my personal experience, in my family, and all the relatives, does not exist and never existed. It's a pure communism on earth, which is hell on earth, the way I can understand, the way I've lived, and the way I've seen it. I come from a place that most of you have not heard. It's Urumqi Xinjiang, or Tihua in Chinese, and the part of the Tartars and the Mongols and the Shebins and many other nationalities. I was born to a family of the Russian descent. My grandfather, Count Dubrovsky, was sent by His Majesty the King of Russia, Nicholas II, as a representative in two phases. One, he was a highly military, and the second, he was an MD. The mission came to Xinjiang, in first one, is 1901, almost over 100 years ago. When my mother grew up, she was married twice, as a matter of fact. She was married to Count Poltavsky at 15, because those were the times when the ladies were very young. Unfortunately, Count Poltavsky ended up to be a traitor to the Chinese, to the Russians who escaped the Soviet Union after the revolution. He was caught by my mother, and as a result of that, the whole entire family of mine has perished. There are 35 members, including my grandfather, both, including my own father, my brothers, and one of my sisters. Mother had 7 children. I was the only one who managed to survive, which is later on we found with another sister of mine in different camps. When I was 2 years of age, the communism came in full force to Xinjiang. The force was impossible to describe in a few minutes here, so I'm not going to go too much in details, with the exception that the nights began from 11 o'clock in the evening until 5 o'clock in the morning. While the people were asleep, the communism, the night people will come to arrest the people, to take them to the prisons and exterminate them, if possible, as soon as possible. I was 2 years of age when I was taken with my sister, who was born actually, she wasn't born, she was born in the prison camps. There were prison camps which established around the Xinjiang, and one of them was, the worst one was Kure. Kure, actually, it's not just a prison camp, but actually they have prepared, just like the Hitler did with Auschwitz, prepared to exterminate through burning the people in groups or in total. I'm sorry, it's a little bit difficult to go through that. When I was 2 years of age, as I said, we ended up in the prison, and mother, in the meantime, before that, of course, father was taken, everyone. Mother was actually to be exterminated, so in order to finish with the Dubrovsky's family, because they were all so-called the white Tsarist instead of being a communist, my mother's throat was cut and she almost died, but she survived, but could not speak perfectly all her life after that. In prison camp, I spent from 2 years of age until I was 12 and a half, almost 13. That was my childhood. So was the childhood of my sister. To explain the 12 years, it's impossible, and I'm not going to burden you with that. But the fact remains that people who were there were about 5,000 people. Most of them did, excuse me, most of them did not survive. Please forgive me. When from Urumqi to Kure, from Kure to Kulja, those are the 3 cities that Some of you, I'm sure, know or seen or heard about that. Finally, after 3 years, which I was 2, that's been almost 5 years of age, from Kure, a person has helped my mother, whom he knew the family. We were transferred to Kulja. In Kulja, we spent another prison camp. After 2 years, I became already almost 7, or 6.5 to be exact. My mother decided to go back and trying to find out whether her father or my grandfather or any of the families have survived in Urumqi, especially father and so. When we came to the airport, because the planes already were flying, the Soviet Gestapo type, of course, the Russians came in with the Chinese and with the Tartars, who already converted themselves into communism, and simply told my mother, in order, madam, you can go by yourself to make sure that you come back after you will find your children, because one of my brothers, she thought that they will be alive, or the father. And therefore Lydia, which is my sister, and Margarita, which is me, are going to be as a hostage. So we were not permitted to go on the plane with mother. Upon return back to the city, I was separated with my sister to a different concentration camps. To explain the youthful memory as a child, I have none, I never had. With the exception that when I became a nurse and became a nurse for the pediatrician, it is only then I comprehended what was the youth of a child, or any child, that goes from 2 years of age until almost 13 to feel or to know. Separation, instead of a year or 6 months or whatever it is that my mother thought, it didn't happen. It happened for another almost 6 years. Mother, in the meantime, was trying to find out whether father and the rest of the family survived, only to find out that they were all executed after a tremendous difficulty in the prison camp, starvation, you name it, and everything, including the experiments that they were doing. In the meantime, Kure, and most of it, it's still unknown, I don't know what it's now, has been discovered, but Kure at that time already, what do you call this, ovens, like Hitler's type, Hitler has done the extermination of the Jews and many others. They were preparing in order to eliminate the race, so-called, of the Tsarist, or the white, as the white Russians they called, and white Chinese, or white, whatever is the nationalities. They were preparing the extermination camp through the, in other words, just like Gestapo did in Hitler's time. So my mother was told in the meantime, because she was trying to find out whether we were still alive. And she was told that we are dead. In other words, that my sister and me have been executed and there is no return of the children. Somehow, grandmother was separated to another prison camp, and she ended up in Urumqi, in Kulja, I'm sorry, that's where I was. And she tried to find out us, so she found us. So it took from 2 years of age of separation until 12, almost 12 and a half, when finally one night, Granny came and she talked to the lady who was looking after us. She said, I'm going to take my grandchild just for overnight and I'll return her tomorrow. So by blessing, I ended up to be in her camp at that time. By the time we arrived, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning their time, or the Kurja time. We were put in a big truck under the potato sacks. To be honest with you, I don't eat potato as a result of that. So we were put in the potato sacks in order to come from Kurja back to Urumqi, which is the Xinjiang section from the Dai. And for 3 days and 3 nights, we were under those sacks. When we arrived to Urumqi, my mother was in Urumqi still trying to find out if any of the relatives been survived. But she wasn't, of course, unaware that we were able to come. So when we was approaching the house, Granny said, "This is the house that you were both being born. And this is the house where we hope we will find your mother," because even the granny was not sure whether mother was also survived. We remember that we were in the little tilega, which is little like a carriage, you know, a horse carriage actually, when we arrived to the doorsteps. I could not speak Russian. I only spoke Chinese and Tartar, because in those years, Russian was already being forgotten. And we were standing at the gate. In the meantime, they were trying to find my mother. We were standing at the gate, and the lady passed us. And I looked at the gate, and I remember even as a child, my mother had a very special coat that she still wore, and it was during the winter time. So I tell to my sister, I said, you know, in Tartar to her, because she spoke Russian, I already couldn't speak Russian since we were separated. I said, I think that was Appa, meaning mother, in Tartar, had the same coat that the lady passed. And of course, my sister was 2 years younger, so she was very quiet, and she just said, mm-hmm, and that was the end. Mother crossed us, she looked at us, and she just passed us without even recognizing, stopped at the corner, and then suddenly turned around and was trying to approach us. And the moment she was approaching, I've seen the lady was approaching, and the tears started. And I was telling to my sister, I wonder, why is she crying? Because we did not know that she was our mother. So that was the meeting of my mother after almost 10 years of separation. My own character, I was not a human, ladies and gentlemen, and this is what communism is all about. I became a child of revenge, a child of despair, a child of hate, like millions and millions others in my own situation. My sister, thank God, she was more with the granny on the way, so she was safe from that misery. In the concentration camp, I had experienced malaria, tuberculosis. I also have almost lost my feet because of this, what do you call it? The bite, snow bite, or what it is? Frostbite. And many other infirmities that it's too much to describe, and I don't want to burden you with that. So finally, after 2 weeks, my mother receives a lady. I'm skipping along because I don't want to hold you up. After 2 weeks of our arrival, on the third week, about 11 o'clock p.m., a carriage came and took us to the airport. Somehow her friend, Lily, Mrs. Lily, she was married a Gestapo type, which is from Soviet Union, but didn't say anything and made the arrangements somehow to see that my mother and us, at least to be safe, to take out of Urumqi into Shanghai, Lanzhou and Shanghai. And the only reason is because she found out through her husband, who was not aware that actually she's still friend with my mother, that my mother had to be executed because she knows too much. So as a result of that, we were saved because of this lady. If it was not for her, trust me, none of us would have been here. We arrived to Lanzhou. From Lanzhou, we went to Shanghai. In Shanghai, I ended up in the orphanage home because there were no place to go. My mother ended up in a household where she cooked and washed and sold, whatever it is, until finally, one of our relatives, under the Morozov, which is very well known in Russia as well, found that we were still alive, whatever is left of the family. And he was the one who introduced us to His Holiness, that is known, which is from Shanghai, John of Shanghai,